Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find the link to our blog in the episode notes. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, share your favorite episode, and jot down our information wherever you found this episode. My name is Andy Libson. I'm a socialist and teacher here in Oakland. We're joined by regular guests here, Kenny Zepeda, socialist and community organizer, and Jessica from the Northwest, but also a teacher, but a college professor, basically, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And today we should have been joined by Jake Kleisik or John Kleisik, but he's sick today and will be joining us next week to do a special presentation on some art and philosophy stuff that we want to go through. So we're going to kind of wing it today. And what we want to talk about is really the holidays are upon us. And in fact, when this episode drops, I think it'll be Christmas Day for many people who celebrate that. And kind of want to talk about the impact of COVID and Omicron and all this on either on us, on the spirit of the holidays, and see where that takes us. So I think that's, Kenny, would you agree that that's kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, that was what I proposed.
Yeah.
Talking about the holidays and getting together and, the complications of doing that in the context of what I think it's, fear-mongering over Omicron, because...
Oh, can I just say one thing that I believe Fauci said, please do not get together with unvaccinated family. I think he said that. So if that will give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. So, telling people who are vaccinated, if you have family members who are unvaccinated, do not get together with them over the holidays. So I think that says all you need to hear about what this episode is going to be about.
And, I think just from that point, what motivated me to think about this topic was the fact there's a bunch of people around me who are vaccinated, who are coming down with, the virus. We've made the argument on this show that the vaccines were not designed to stop the spread. The whole premise of the mandates, right? And the premise of protecting others by imposing mandates on vaccinated people. And so that, again, is like thrown upside down, right? Right now that I see a lot of people I know, and it's not that I don't care, it's that I'm not surprised that they're coming down with COVID. They are, a lot of people are, because they thought that they were immune to, getting any viruses. And I mean, and also, it's also flu season, right? The flu has disappeared. Basically, it's all apparently all Omicron. Yeah, so in that context, I have a friend who's struggling massively because they tested positive for COVID recently. They were heading to see their family and staying with some friends. This person is not vaccinated and trusted some friends with that information because they were isolated here in San Francisco by other people. And so when they came out positive, because they went with bars with other people, now they're being lynched basically publicly and thrown under the bus and being blamed for catching COVID, even though they were all in public areas. And so now the biggest argument that they're guilt tripping my friend with is that now I can't see my family because of you. Because finally, right after 2 years of isolation and being split apart, spending a holiday season without family, right? Because that's what we were told last time. Here we are again, right? And so I was curious as to whether any of you have experiences, or if your personal lives have also, been disrupted because of people's anxieties, in what we see as safety now versus what we used to see as safety.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd. And it's just the perfect example, right, of getting people to police each other in the absence of having actual whatever militarized bouncers at Christmas parties.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's absurd.
Mhm. Yeah, and the interesting thing is that, like you said, Kenny, there are people who are vaccinated, the so-called breakthrough cases. There are people who are vaccinated who are getting COVID, or at least who are getting a positive PCR test, whatever that means, because that's what we're talking about. There are people who are vaccinated and unvaccinated who are having positive PCR tests. And for people to say that when an unvaccinated person gets a positive PCR test, that they're to blame for the fact that, oh, I've now got a positive PCR test. But if a vaccinated person has a positive PCR test and other people get it, well, that's just breakthrough cases. That's just, what are you going to do? Those are rare, which it isn't, and even using, I don't even know if these things are Omicron or not. Frankly, you have to sequence that thing, and I have questions about how much what is being attributed to Omicron is actually Omicron. But if you just took the liars at their own word, Omicron is supposedly one of those things that has so many mutations in it that it may not be recognizable by the vaccine, which was made against the particular spike protein, right? So this thing is so mutated in its spike protein that it's not able to be recognized, and so it should be able to get through. So the idea, so if it's Omicron, if that's what you were saying, then everyone, like vaccinated, unvaccinated, are frankly united in being potentially subject to this. So it shows that people are not just buying into the state narrative, which I think is awful, but it shows how much people are oriented to attack each other, right? One of the issues we were thinking we might talk about is immigration. And it's common parlance on the left to know that undocumented immigrants are scapegoated in political seasons. And they actually are going to be this year, again, by Republicans by and large. I don't want to talk about that, but that's kind of what's happening. That's why Republicans are kind of rebranding themselves as the ones who are like tough on immigration this season, which is why one of our members brought up that immigration is coming up a lot. It is coming up a lot because I think the Republicans are using that issue again this year. But that same left, which understands this, is again completely incapable of seeing how they are falling for a scapegoat tactic. And I don't really even know what to say about a left that is so not reflective of itself to be able to do that to each other, and not see not just how wrong it is to blame, right? But how inappropriate the blame is, how wrongly the blame is being placed in that situation.
Yeah, so we obviously have been primed into this situation, of attacking, blaming each other, and like you said, Lipson, it's coming from the left, people that are associated with more liberal values of some sort of egalitarian, better world. But what I've come to learn through this process is that we've talked about before, like this cult mentality, right? Like you can't challenge anything that's science related, and because it even evokes that statement that Fauci said, right? That he is science. You cannot question science. Cannot question Dr. Fauci. And I don't think this is new. I think that the pieces of this moment have been laid out for at least my adult life. Because when I think back in my own liberal, years, I do see these elements of imposition of wanting to design a society, from above, and that this also complete faith on the expert consensus and complete, capitulation to people in uniform, basically. And by people in uniform, I mean people with some sort of authority, right? And I was actually watching Jimmy Dore, a little bit about this comedian who was making, basically telling you not to think for yourself. And I know the New York Times posted that too.
I've just had my third shot. A booster, they call it. How many more are they going to make us get? Don't know, don't care. Because I, like you probably, understand there is a global pandemic, and people much, much smarter than you and me have decided this is the best plan of action to avoid lots more people dying or cluttering up hospital hallways.
This friend who I talked about, right, who's being isolated, who's being attacked, this friend has had conversations with people and has been able to protect themselves from the attacks, laying down the parameters for very tense conversations about the vaccine. And this person, it's in the same camp as us, questions a lot, does not want the vaccine, their lives has been made difficult. And yet, even though they are in this camp, the pressure from outside is really getting to this person.
Yeah.
This person is going as far as telling me, I just feel pressure to go get vaccinated right now, even though they have, they tested positive. They had a PCR test that's positive, and they are exhibiting some symptoms. Mm-hmm. No one around is having really grave symptoms. It's like the flu. It's the flu. It's symptoms essentially. But again, it's just, my point is the social pressure, and I also think that's where Trump was instrumental in this, in creating this binary, right? Either you're in science or you're against science. But in order to arm the left, not the right, arm the left, because when you brought up the Republicans are not the ones who are going to deliver the world that the Fourth Industrial Revolution requires. It's good because they will face resistance. We are here in an administration that's under Biden. One thing that I was so worried about was that people will relent in terms of putting some sort of resistance, even though it was misguided with Trump. Because on immigration, the same shit is happening, and then some. And no one's saying anything. They're staying quiet because we got rid of the boogeyman, and we're back to fighting these other evil. And so I don't know. It's just my point is that this is not new. It's been a long process to get to this point. I've seen the seeds of this moment of imposing, censoring, you're with us or against us from years back. From when I was in college in 2005 at UC Berkeley. I've seen this polarization that is just, now we just don't have white or black, right? Or male, female, or sexist, not sexist, or pro-immigrant, anti-immigrant. Now we have something that's present every day, because it threatens your very own life. And so I see why people become cops, and police others, and are willing to do the shit that I see in that I've studied in societies that commit genocide. They dehumanize neighbors that they lived for generations, but something changes on the and the lynching is not happening physically, not yet. It has happened in some countries. There's been some people that have acted out of anxiety, but it's happening virtually, socially, in obviously I understand for that. But it's sad that it comes in the context of now, because people are weaponizing that in the holiday season, right? To blame others, it's your fault that I'm not going to see my family. Never mind that it's been the people that kept you from Christmas last year based on lies.
Yep.
So it's your neighbor. It's not the people at the top. It's not the public officials. It's not Dr. Fauci who flip flops. It's not the authorities that are gonna soon mandate a booster in order to grant you the full ability to participate in society, right? Because they are gonna redefine that here in the U.S. They're doing it in Europe already. They did it in Israel, but it's coming for us too. Israel is on its fourth, right?
Yeah, I think, they obviously know that the biggest, most effective pressure comes from family and communities, right? Like they know there's a high level of distrust of the government and a lot of institutions in this country, especially. And that's why they, the orchestrators and ruling class have kind of like targeted so many, they've targeted churches since the very beginning of this whole thing. They've targeted community centers. They were sending people right into barber shops in Black communities, like shit like that. I mean, it's like basically as far as you can get beyond actually entering people's homes. Although that has happened, and I know in like some places in the world. I don't know about the US, but and then the media, I think that's one of the biggest crimes, right? Is because the media, because we're all so addicted to our smartphones and our devices, the media kind of is in your private home for a lot of us. And yeah, I mean, just like, sorry, I'm like all over the place, but going back to like the immigration connection, I'm just thinking about like all the different types of borders and the way that, with this holiday season, it's like your doorstep becomes a border. And how are you going to police it? Or are you going to police it?
Kenny, when you said, wait a second, the thing that's stopping you from seeing your family are these state measures. And is the fear that has been pushed by the state, by corporations, by the mainstream media. That is the barrier towards people seeing. There is no other barrier. It's particularly in light of even their own language around Omicron is it's mild at best. Okay. Again, I have to always put caveats like if you believe, because I don't really know what is true from what they're saying and what is not. But if you buy their own language, that they would say it's mild. So the restriction.
Well, they sorry to interrupt you, Andy, but like they always couch it as like it's very mild unless you're unvaccinated. Then it could be deadly, right? Like, what did Biden say? Like, it's be like
frankly, I mean, they will say that they'll say that greater chance of hospitalization because they'll say I think it's an 80 time. What they say is an 80 time greater chance of hospitalization for unvaccinated. But here's what they mean. And this is, again, their numbers. They say if you're vaccinated with the Delta, this is with Delta, not Omicron. Again, it's like it's a house of cards of lies. So I don't know but I'm just going to use their words. If you talked about Delta, 0.01% chance of hospitalization if you're vaccinated. That's their numbers. And a 0.89% chance of hospitalization if you're unvaccinated. So that's their 80 times greater. It's an 80 times. Everything is below 1% chance, and that's across the board, right? From all age groups. So basically, we're saying that you have everyone, unvaccinated or vaccinated, has less than a 1% chance of being hospitalized.
If you're under 80 and you're not obese, there is like statistically almost no chance. Like it's like on the level of being struck.
Right. But this is just taking the numbers, like aggregate of ages and things like that. Yeah. And so that was with Delta. But Omicron, and already they're saying in South Africa, but man, Omicron came and went, and Fauci, I saw a headline today where he was saying like, Omicron it may be mild, but please do not think that the pandemic is over, which, it's like, he's not saying please, but he's saying, don't think the thing is over. So it's astounding to me how, like, even I forget that the measures that are keeping us from seeing each other are either literally state restrictions on our movement, or two, the head fixing that's been going on, that they're not, you can just choose to say they're lying. And I want to go see my relatives. Yes, people visit each other when they're sick. We've done that for quite some time. We've made choices about, wait, I'm too sick to come. Maybe I'm not too sick. That has gone on for quite some time. You call your relatives and you say, hey, I'm really sick. Are you okay with me coming down? And generally they say yes, particularly if it's the holidays, and, unless you don't feel too sick to travel. I have to remind people that's what the world was before. Now it's as if, no one can even get mildly sick. But again, that's because all of this has to be seen through the rubric of fear and control. And people are forgetting, even I am sometimes forgetting how that really is operating on us. Because When I think about traveling, I think about, am I allowed to travel? When I think about going into somebody's house, is it okay if I go into somebody's house? I'm not just thinking about my relative there. In some ways, the state is imposing itself on my own thinking that I could be doing something wrong if I do that, not just with regards to my family, but with regards to the state that this government that I live under. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, I do want to say that the Republicans are just as on board about this as the Democrats. They've got a different way of doing this. Trump just came out yesterday and basically said everyone should get vaxxed. Don't let them take our vaccines away from us. Basically saying, please, he's trying to speak to his own base to say, please don't say bad things about the vax. Remember, that's my vax. I was Operation Warp Speed OG, right? And he's trying to tell his base, go get vaxxed. I got vaxxed. I got boosted. You should do the same thing. His base was okay with it. I don't think it's going to be a winner, but it's clear to me that people like DeSantis in Florida or the Republicans, what they're going to do is say, we'll protect you from the mandates, which I don't think they will, but they'll say that. We're also going to protect you from the immigrants. So that's what they're doing. We're the ones who are going to keep U.S. workers safe. And anytime a Democrat says they're going to keep you safe, and anytime a Republican says they're going to keep you safe, I can guarantee you they're trying to not keep you safe. And that is the thing that we have to kind of just keep in mind.
I don't know why my mind is going to religion, but something you were saying in your first point, Andy, about just the way that this is all counter to the spirit of the holidays and the spirit of Christmas, of you're supposed to bring your grandma chicken soup when she's sick, right? That's how you show care, not by isolating her and never visiting her. And I'm not a religious person, but Christmas, it's not really I don't really even think of it as a religious holiday anymore because it's been so corporatized and it's it's all consumery, but it is a Christian holiday, right? And Jesus and the leper, that's one of the iconic stories that even I remember from my very early church school days of he went and touched the leper, right? That nobody would go near and no one would help. And yeah, okay, he had whatever mystical, magical, I'm not religious, haven't read it in about 25 years. But, there's something about that human touch of I care, I'm not afraid of you. And that to me is as much the healing, it's as much responsible for the healing as, modern medicine now or whatever, or Jesus's powers. I'm botching that that Bible passage, but I don't know, it's just so ironic, right? That we're all just walking around treating each other as dangerous, biohazards. And it's all very 9/11-y, going back to your point, Kenny, about how you see the progression from your college days. It's all, oh, the terrorists could be among you, so we have to screen you and we have to set up all these green, orange, red, we're in the danger zone. It's just it's all very scapegoaty.
I mentioned in another episode, I talked about my cousin, my family in Canada, and I had plans to go back to Canada in July, in summer. I have plans to go down to Mexico to visit my partner's family again. We visited them a few months ago, and the grandma's not vaccinated. They live in a ranch. There were cases there. Some elders did die, but they're still not vaccinated. And the conversation about vaccine never came up, and we were fine, and same with my grandma. I visited her this year after being isolated, and so again, just that point that being in community with people without this sense of doubt, right? Because I think that's what it's in the back of our minds, has been programmed, this sense of doubt whether someone is dangerous to you. And the people that are more in that COVID cult way of thinking, act out of fear. And end up doing the bidding of the state. And so, but I think now, like, am I going to be able to see my family again? And also, like I said on the show here, I had to get vaccinated to go say goodbye to my cousin and be with my family. I didn't want to. And yet I got the Johnson & Johnson because I didn't want it to work, had the least efficacy, blah, blah, blah. And now it turns out that in 2 to 3 months, I might be illegal again. It would be illegal to enter Canada and see my family, be with my family. And never mind that it's their choice whether they want to interact with me, right? Never mind that, and so we're imposing. It's also the same thing with my partner's grandma. She doesn't have the vaccine, so it's difficult for her to travel back to the U.S. She's a U.S. citizen, and my partner doesn't know if she will ever see her again because of this bullshit. And so that's where we're going soon, because she's in her 80s, and my partner doesn't fear COVID as much as it is just these extra limitations in the shifting landscape that. Sometimes the borders will be open, sometimes it won't be. And, it's just exhausting. And even among people that don't give a shit about whether someone has COVID or not, essentially, because that's what my circle is, my family circle, my partner's circle. They don't ask those questions. They don't ask you to get tested. My friend who I started this episode talking about her, she has had to get tested to go visit family, so that it's not just a job requisite. It's now you have to get tested and show proof, to some people who have anxiety about this. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, to see if you guys have any similar experiences, with family, friends, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dealing with a similar situation and not quite as extreme, but just with the border situation, because half my family's back in the UK. Those borders are open. Like, I could go, but because I'm unvaccinated, well, first of all, I'd have to test before I go, and then once I get there, and then I think, like, forget if it's like 3 or 5 days after that. I don't know how many times it is. It's an absurd amount of times, and I would have to quarantine for 10 days. So that means, like, it costs a lot of money to fly from the Pacific Northwest to the United States. I have a job. I get 10 days, 2 weeks off for Christmas. I would have loved to go and visit like my grandparents. My gran is, she just turned 91 a couple weeks ago. She's getting really old. And I feel exactly the same, Kenny, of like, I don't know if I'll ever see her again. Because I just don't see how I would be able to get over there. And so my aunt and uncle who live on the East Coast, so this is like my grandson, my uncle and his wife, they are there right now. And they're both vaccinated. Everyone in my family is vaccinated except for me, literally everyone. And they went over and so she actually my aunt tested positive for COVID, like within the past month, maybe even less than that. And yeah, she's still allowed. They had to test like before they went, and then they had to test once they got there, and they did have to quarantine. But then as long as they tested negative within, I don't know, I think they had to quarantine for maybe like 2 or 3 days. But then they tested negative. So now they're free because they're vaccinated. They don't have to do the whole 10 days. So yeah, I mean, even for them, it seems like a lot of steps, some of which are completely beyond your control. I mean, these PCR tests are bullshit. Like, we've known this from the beginning. Freaking like papaya tested positive. I mean, that's absurd. And I would be very worried even if I could get over there and like be free from once the quarantine would be over, which apparently they do check up on you. I would be worried even about getting back into the US, or like getting stranded there. And they don't pay for, it's not like they pay for lodging or whatever. So I haven't even gotten like to the point of having to navigate like my own family policing me, because I haven't had that conversation because I can't get over there. My parents didn't want me to come visit them. They're in the States. And I wanted to go visit them multiple times during 2020, and they were like not. They didn't like lay down like a law, like you may not come because you haven't been jabbed, but that was kind of the subtext. It was like, it's not really the best time. Like maybe wait. And now it's, what has it been? Almost 2 years of this crap. And people still think like, oh, if we could just get like that last whatever percentage, it'll be over. Like it's not going to be over. Like it's never going to be over. I don't know.
Yeah, and that was what. Let me see if I can find this quote from. This was a fellow socialist who I've respected for many years. I mean, and she's been an activist. You know, that we've worked together for many years around other stuff. Let me see if I can find this. Hold on. You know, there was we put something out about the December 18th Day of Action, and I was on this thread, and this person wrote. This is what this socialist wrote. She goes, "You anti-vaxxers are helping to prolong this virus and cause more sickness in your community." And I don't even know where to begin with the level of ignorance. And this is like a person who is a Marxist, who I know is not ignorant of the world, like who knows that the state lies and corporations lie, and that the point is to divide each other. And I can't understand, like, it's just so wholly untrue. Even using the narrative of the liars, it doesn't hold together in terms of what we know about how these vaccines, so-called vaccines, work. So it really is it's like, it makes my mind a little crazy. But I think in your case, Jessica, I mean, that is a more obvious case of literally the state interceding to just make it nearly impossible for you to see part of your family. And then the one at home with your folks, I mean, without putting it on personally on your own family, it makes me wonder. So I'm not Christian, but I love Christmas. It was a great holiday. It was like I would come down and see the tree, and the train would be going around the tree, and there was tinsel hanging on the tree, and there were presents under it. And I got really excited about it, and I couldn't fall asleep on the evening of the 24th. And then it was great to be down there with my dad. Would sometimes be there, and even if my dad wasn't there, then my mom was there, and there were stockings, and we were all together, and we'd just be doing that. And that is the memory that I have of this time of like family and getting together. And if you would have asked me, okay, as corporatized as Christmas has become, whatever, you know, it's the major money-making period for the businesses. But if you had asked me if there was a pretty substantial kernel of community still built within that thing, within our country, I would have said yes. I would have said, because we've all had those experiences or some version of those. So, but I don't know what to make of how, I would kind of say how easily that has been ripped apart. I don't think it happened from Christmas just becoming commodified. Maybe that was the thing, but are our traditions so fragile, if you will, like so built on nothing that they kind of fell apart? Like, wouldn't Christmas or Thanksgiving, I would have thought it would have had this kind of like magnetic attractive effect that would have had to be overcome, that your parents would be like, you know what, come down for Christmas. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would have thought, and I'm not putting it on your parents because I think this is happening around the country. And maybe this is happening. Maybe people are going like, F you, we're getting together. And maybe that is happening. But if it is happening, obviously you're not going to get it from the mainstream media. And I think there's enough stories out there. And I can certainly say not as much from my own family, because I think we would get together. My reasons for not traveling are more financial because of my work instability. And I just didn't want to put anything on I didn't want to pay for anything major in the context of where we didn't know where future paychecks were coming from. But don't know what to make of what we would just say as our traditions, as our culture. Was it so paper thin that it could just be taken apart like this? I don't know. That's kind of negative, but that's a question I have.
Like to jump off from that is, it's the question of, like there's people who still long for normalcy, right? Some sort of sense of normal, like as time goes on, things change, evolve, and they get diluted, and especially when like, you're not practicing, right? Like these rituals of getting together and making memories, and sharing humanity, right? Like together. So I don't know, like, like if they will come back, and, I mean, I get the sense that you're asking a rhetorical question about this thing. I've always thought that, at least in the US, coming from another culture, that these, at least from my coworkers, the people I work with, it's always been like kind of a chore to go visit family, or like the family bonds they're not as tight as in other places, at least from where I come from. And so there is no priority. And so I'm not surprised that these, people are finding harder in the US to stay together. Because I know a lot of Latino community, they don't give a shit. They've gotten together during this COVID thing. Okay. 30 people, 40 people parties, they still get together, and my own family in Southern California, they're a mix of vaccinated and unvaccinated, and, they still live together, hang out together. And so just going back to that notion of these bonds of, community and like holiday rituals, they're so loose here to me that, and I'm seeing this process happen in Guatemala, as Guatemala is becoming more Americanized, the bonds, the family bonds, because people work schedules that are opposite of each other. That's something that is normal here, but not over there. Over there, like most people used to be like at home by 6 o'clock. You would have dinner together, or you would put a rocking chair and go outside and talk and play with your friends, and we are supposed to be an advanced economy, right? And we are way ahead in terms of the access to technologies, and that plays part of it to me. Like instead of having kids playing in the cul-de-sac, right? That beautiful image, right, of communities before, even in now you don't see kids even playing sports. They have to be forced, because they're connected to what I think is already the process of transhumanism. You're detached from your body and your physical experience into experiencing the world through VRs, which are becoming more and more widely available, but again, video games are not new. They've been there. They're just becoming more insidious. And just to make my point, I guess, I'm not surprised. It's America, the US, and maybe in like more rural America, you will find more bonds. But like in the coastal areas, the epicenter of capitalism, where capital has gone, after decapitalizing rural America, there is no sense of community. I came back from Canada, and my family lives in not in Montreal, but like some time away. And I wish I could have stayed there. I have no community in San Francisco, like over there, obviously we were brought together by a death, and people didn't give a shit. No one asked me if I was vaccinated. No one asked me if I got tested, and with random people, we were just mourning, my cousin who brought a lot of people together. And so I came back to San Francisco, and it's like dystopia. Everyone's afraid of each other, and now my coworkers are talking about COVID infections that happen at a staff party from another place that we know, and everyone's freaking out, and like but at the same time, I find that to be a prison, like a mental prison, because I'm not afraid, like, like, whatever happens, like I can't control that. The only thing I can control is whether I'm healthy and as healthy as I can be. And part of being healthy is not being afraid. And that's the thing that we've forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, I think isolation breeds isolation, right? And I completely agree with you, Kenny, that our bonds, especially in the US, like they really are that fragile. And that was something that was happening before COVID.
Yeah.
And I was totally guilty of it, like kind of with the financial thing, Andy. Like, yeah, I mean, I've been living like pretty much paycheck to paycheck for most of my adult life. And so it was a lot of times like it was just a lot easier to not visit people and to just stay home. And, I'm like kind of a homebody anyway. And oh, I have to work, or oh, I have to, like, it's hard. Like it's hard and annoying and expensive. And yeah, I mean, you have to go out of your way, even if it's like local, even if you're not having to cross like a border. And then since COVID, they've made it so easy to stay home, right? It's like you have Zoom and you have the whole internet, right? And you've got New York Times articles about how to bake sourdough bread from scratch and like whatever. Like they've given you every single tool and temptation and reason in the box to stay home and to not go and not be in community. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's for a lot of people, like, yeah, it's just, they don't, maybe they're tempted for a second, or they think, oh, like that would be nice, or I could, but ultimately, like, it's just so much easier not to. And I was like, I mean, there's like 4 billion articles like this from the past 2 years, but somebody posted on social media this morning, an Atlantic article, an editorial, I'm assuming, that said vaccine refusers don't get to dictate terms anymore. And then the subtitle is people who opt out of shots shouldn't expect their employers, health insurers, and fellow citizens to accommodate them. And so I feel like that word accommodate, like that's so perfect. It's become like this massive like burden, for anybody to, like, God forbid, take on that risk of letting somebody whose status they might not know, or, even just like to get on a plane. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, listening to what you're saying, Jessica, maybe I think it might have been a mistake not to head to Dallas to see my family, even if I was, stressed about, because I think I fell right into what you said, and particularly now, because of what you described as what happened for you when you went to Canada, I actually think it's going to be important for me to remember that going over that additional hurdle that has been intentionally placed there is going to be important, to kind of remind myself about connections. So yeah, that
doesn't have to be at Christmas. I mean,
yeah, no, I understand, but it could have been, and I think I would fall subject to that same thing that you're describing, Jessica. And I'm just gonna mental note. Maybe I'll put it in my resolution for New Year's, to actually not let those hurdles get in the way of things that that are important and that are being intentionally destroyed, and not let that happen. I'm very conscious of it. Say, like in our workers and students for choice group, and in organizing kind of stuff, like to not let us get just frayed easily. But I think it's just as true, for family. So and for friends and things like that. So although, I mean, between me and Kenny, all I have to do is go across a bridge to get there. And Kenny, you and I haven't really seen each other that much. So I think that's important to do. But I haven't seen Brian as much. And so just kind of taking a little inventory on not letting myself fall into the trap that has been opened up for me.
I think that's like a completely normal American experience. Like pre-COVID, like friends are people you see, like as adults, working adults, friends are people you see like maybe once a month. You get together for coffee and you like just puke out like all, this is the updates on my life. Here are the highlights, the bullet points. And then they tell you yours, and then you leave, and then you go do it again in like a month. I mean, that's like a pretty typical like adult friendship, and it's really sad.
I mean, I think it's part of this system, again, it's this isolation, and that's why it's not surprising that this is happening with COVID, right? Like, this further isolation at a more minute, like precise level, even within our own, immediate community. And that's why I'm like, I try to speak up about this stuff, because that is what I'm trying to preserve, like, because that's what I think makes us human. Otherwise, we're just machines producing some shit, and we're not interacting with someone else. We're living like, and I have this phrase, I guess, I work to live. I don't live to work, and also I like, another phrase in my mind is like, fuck Fridays. We even like the fucking happy hour, someone like Richard Wolff, also like a Marxist, he talks about that the happy hour was invented, to kind of mitigate the miserable lives that we live here, and like, I don't want that. And it turns out that it's worse, because people, I get why people would want to work from home, right? Like, because even people are asking for this shit. I get it, because your job is shit, very likely is shit. And so a lot of people would rather work from home. But the what I think is ironic is that you're bringing work into your own home is more invasive and more omnipresent. You cannot detach yourself from work. Now it's in your house, in your place of safety. And that again is an assault on humanity, on safety, on psychology, on spirituality, on everything, and that is contrary to public health. That is contrary to a healthy life, in my view. And, yet it's another instance where, just like people policing themselves, we ourselves are inviting, this virus, which I call capitalism, into our homes, and deteriorate us even further. Brian, in his episode, he talked about how the system basically breaks you down emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And the more insidious it becomes, because that's what tracking is about, right? Like, that's what they want to know everything about us, to see how much more juice they can get out of us, us in nature in general. And so the more we ask for these things, the more we don't question these things, the more we don't resist these things, the more we don't dissent and reject even their laws, because like the dictations, the less we'll have to save, and in terms of our own humanity. And so I don't know, it's just all happening so fast. And the scary part is that what I just described, the fact that people are asking for it, is what makes it intangible. Like, people don't see it as dictations, in techno-fascism, like, they don't. I've had people who see what's happening in Europe, and they're like, that's never going to happen in the US. And I'm like, well, it's different, but it is happening. It is already here. Same thing with Canada. Even my cousin who passed away, we talked about this topic, and he was like, damn, like, Americans are stupid. And then I started asking him questions, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but Canada is way ahead of us, actually, in terms of, implementing this bullshit. And so, yeah, this is global. This is insidious, and it's scary, because that's the sad part for me, that we are asking for it in a lot of ways.
I wanted to add too, just on the significance of the holidays. I mean, traditionally, for a lot of us, like, it is a really happy time, but it's also like, for people who are suffering, if they're unemployed, or they come from broken homes, or they don't have a good relationship to their family, or they're struggling. As often, I think, like, suicide rates go up, right? Drug abuse goes up every year. People drink too much. People isolate themselves. So I think, all that is just going to be compounded. I'm sure it was last year. I think there's probably going to be a lot of people, like, taking their life the next month.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's just unemployment. Or even like some fixed problem. I have often heard about this November, December season as a time when people kind of go through depression, or it's a downtime for them, as much as and sometimes people think it's because everything is put so happy, and they don't feel, I don't know what, but there's no doubt that I think it's that a period that historically has been sometimes a downer for people. That can't get better. With
Omicron, is that how you say it? Omicron?
I don't know if it's Omicron or Omicron, but it's not the way Brandy pronounces it, which is Omicron.
I feel like they do that on purpose, like make people say it like 5 times more than you need to say it. Now it's just like in your head.
Yeah.
Like a lot of this support places, hotlines, and shelters and stuff like probably won't be accessible because Omicron, because COVID.
Yeah. Kenny, go ahead.
I have a question. I don't know if this is the right moment or if this is the episode to ask, because I just had this thought, right? Like wondering about what the end goal is for this, right? That it's not, I don't think it's to get 100% vaccinated people. The end game is for me to get everyone connected to the systems of surveillance and tracking and data mining. And so I wonder if at some point they will relent on the vaccines and they will dedicate and double down on contact tracing as the way to keep us safe, from anything in the future. Do you see a scenario maybe playing out like that, where, again, they will admit that, okay, they will say that the virus has evolved too much, where like these vaccines are inefficient, and focus on that contact tracing, which I think, again, is kind of the holy grail for the, this industrial revolution or whatever bullshit.
I feel like they're already going to lose people now that the boosters are starting to be required, because it's like, okay, say you convince me and I change my mind. I'm like, okay, sign me up. I can get the vaccine, but then like I still would have to wait, 6 months or something to get a booster to even be like granted my freedoms. So like if they keep rolling out these boosters, like some of us are just like we're done. Like we're never going to catch up to that level. But that doesn't really answer your question, but it just made me think of that. But what do you think, Andy?
Well, I think I agree with what you're saying, which is, first of all, I don't think they necessarily intend to get 100%. I think if they get essentially 85 to 90% buy-in on lockdowns and state power in order to keep us safe, then they can rely on that percentage that supports them to get rid of the dissent, that to the extent that it exists. So that's how I look at it in terms of that. But I also think
the fucking phones too. It's the stupid smartphones.
Yes. But I think issues like global warming are going to come into play, and there's going to be cyber crap that's going to happen. I think, frankly, because of the thing I read that Jake sent about the SPARS, a new virus that's being role modeled for 2025 in the Johns Hopkins study, I think we have a new round of pandemic. So I think they have, like, the way I look at it is waves, right? They push a wave and they get something instituted and they come back and they push another wave. Like Jessica, you sent that article about University of Washington being at home. Everyone's going to be staying at home for the week when they start. And I feel like they just keep hitting us with cycles of control to institute various parts of the thing that are still not fully in place, like the level of remote that they want to go to. But
like they didn't really go that hard on Delta. But then now with Omicron, they are. Even
though Omicron, by all stretches, is even from their own thing is less dangerous. But whatever. The things I'm looking for is the implementation of digital ID, like that, how well that starts to come together and how that gets integrated with all your other information, not just health information, but other elements of and how much it starts to becomes, and then when our currency goes digital, and then when the social credit system comes into play, these are the elements that I'm looking for to see how there can be there can be alternatives built to that. Those are some of the markers I'm looking for to see where they go next. But from my vantage point, I don't think, I do see this ending in World War III, because I do think there is a competition in play, not a collaboration. So I don't think this goes too much further.
What do you think World War III is going to look like, Andy? So I can prepare myself.
Well, let me just say this. No, Britain, I don't know, but all I know is that the world wars were a surprise because World War I was a surprise because it brought in technology that was only first seen in the U.S. Civil War. And then the body count was way bigger than they expected because technology of the time was brought to bear into modern warfare. And so that was the 15 million person body count. And then when you have 50 to 60 million killed in World War II, again, the technology of the day, and that's pre-nuclear war, really. That technology of the day was brought to bear to essentially create a body count that was, again, very much a surprise. So personally, I think there will be a war in which the technology of the day is fully brought to bear so that one side the various sides are determined to win and will flip the board if they're going to lose. And so
you think there'll be like nuclear weapons used?
Yeah. I think everything will get brought to bear. I think it's bioweapons. I think it's nuclear weapons. I think they will fight this like a caged animal because they are desperate. I mean, and people think, oh, they're so powerful. It's like, no, they do feel desperate in relationship to a competitor, just like Britain felt desperate in relationship to Germany, and even felt desperate in relationship to the United States, but couldn't do anything about their displacement.
I think they feel desperate in relation to us too. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Like their narrative is so absurd, and they're going to such lengths that I do think they feel threatened by the paupers too.
Yes, I would just say that when I think about what I call our ruling class, in the U.S., I think they're afraid of the U.S. working class, but I think they're more afraid of rising China right now than the U.S. working class because of the level of struggle in this country. If the level of struggle was higher, then I know that they're looking over their shoulders. They know that there was the 30s in this country, and they know there's a history of revolutions in other countries that they don't see themselves immune from. But I think their more immediate threat that they are organizing the society around is the data collection, the level of data collection that's going on that China is getting away with, that the left actually in this country actually calls China a success story in relationship to COVID because they're being so successful in data collection. That level of big data analytics collection is what the US, I think, is really concerned about in terms of AI development, and what they see that as a game changer for. We can have US could have the most massive military, but if China develops an AI that is substantially different than what the US is able to develop because of the ability to collect data across the globe, then I think they're concerned that can be tilted and flipped because of the force multiplier that a particular AI would represent.
I think too, because all that technology is dependent on resources, especially like, lithium, cobalt, nickel, all that. And I know the US is kind of losing its grip a little on imperialism. I mean, they just had that ALBA meeting, right? last week?
Mm-hmm.
And China's, all up in Africa.
Right.
I mean, all over the world, but especially in areas where they're very rich in natural resources. And then especially when it's combined with like people starting to rise up and realize like, hey, actually, we want to be a sovereign nation because we are a sovereign nation. Let's kick the US out and, maybe do business with China. I don't know.
And we obviously, these geopolitical big movements are relevant, right, for our lives. And like I also see like a possibility there, in terms of, we already know 9/11, right? What happened post 9/11? The systems of surveillance and FISA courts, the secretive operations and stuff, and the ability of the government to detain you if they're accused of terrorism, indefinitely. And so I see this possibility too, like in the case where war breaks out, right, with whomever, China. And these technologies of surveillance will be used for our own safety, again, to decide who's an enemy, who's not, who's at the center, who's not, and so again, these technologies that are coming live have an implication beyond the vaccine, beyond COVID. You know, in just about controlling dissenting voices in the context of more competition, right, between these empires. And so, and these technologies are already in place, actually, in the border, the southern border. You know, the face tracking, you know, face recognition, and all this stuff. You know, the sensors. That's one thing that people get wrong about the southern border. You know, and the whole narrative that the Democrats built about the wall and the Republicans built about the wall, because the wall is not a physical; it's a digital wall. You know, and it's pretty efficient, actually. Mm-hmm. You know, at doing what it does. And it involves cameras, drones, robots, you know, sensors, satellites, and soon geofencing, right? Because that's what the implications are of this contact tracing bullshit, that they can control, they can track where you're at, you know, they can track your movements, and depending on your behavior, limit you from participating in certain aspects of society. The more connected we get to this bullshit, and even your money won't be worth it, because it's digital money, it can be shut down, right? Like we talked about that, versus cash money that you can use anywhere, and especially when someone is wrongly, you know, convicting you or accusing you of something. And so, but the corners where you can be an individual with independent minds will be hard to find. You know, those corners, and again, that's Big Brother, right? That's George Orwell, and you know, and I think we're well on our way. And I guess my point again is just, it's not just about the vaccine, the damn vaccine or COVID, you know, that we have to fight. And that's why that other conversation that we were going to have, right, about borders and participating with people that may disagree with us in terms of immigration, will have to be on the table if we want to be successful at fighting the shit that's coming. You know, because it's not just limited to this. Because I, in fact, think that in order to understand the vaccine passports, you have to understand immigration. You have to understand the road of borders. Because, like you said, Jessica, you know, our borders are coming to our doors, and like people's lives individually, and they will be the first line of policing. You know, whether they want to affect or like throw someone under the bus. That's why I get scared, you know, or like about my friend's experience, right? Who's being outed and thrown under the bus, right? Like there is no jail time, there's no things like that, right? But we're not that far from there, and brings me back to Justice Scalia, right, Lipson, where he said something along the lines of, "If you think we will never have concentration camps in this country again, you're crazy." Because again, all this, it's at play, and that's why it's important to not only understand history, to understand our present, you know, and our future, really, because like, and we have to use some imagination, because things don't play out exactly the same way, but the same mechanisms and structures that motivate this behavior are still here. And so that's what we're going to have to talk about, other topics that and how they, you know, they are related.
I think too, we are really, really fucked with this Assange verdict, with the appeal, you know, being seemingly successful. I mean, I know people like to really minimize like this one guy's struggle, but it is a fucking insane precedent. And like you're saying about shutting down dissenting voices, which they've already done a really good job of, but this is going to be, I mean, every journalist could be prosecuted anywhere in the world. Like anytime you say anything bad, anything that would expose US power, I don't know. I think, yeah, I'm very worried about like how people are even going to get their information in a scenario like whether it's World War III or, you know, just the next 15 different variants of COVID or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's look, early on when we first started our episodes of What's Left, even before Kenny joined us, Eduardo and I was forced to kind of say, well, what do I think are the basics of Marxism? And one of the things that I kept on coming back to was how Marx described capitalism as the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. And he wasn't just saying occasionally it was like sometimes it was, he was saying that is the system you have been living under. You have been living under a dictatorship, whether you knew it or not. You were born into a dictatorship, and it's been there since the American Revolution. With the rise of the capitalist class, at least in this country, and you could have said the same thing with the French Revolution across the pond. But he was saying you are just replacing one dictatorship, which was the feudal order, for another, which is a rule of a minority over you. And I think that's something that's really been, for me, it's been borne out. Like the veneer of democracy that we have lived under as being, some people might be saying, oh, wait, our democracy is going away. And I think what's really happening is it's like in the movie Batman, the Joker, he had the flesh face. And then when he would press on his face, it would reveal the white, his true white face underneath, And I think that's what's happening is the mask of democracy that we have lived in is being kind of melting away to reveal what the true form of government we live under, which I think is a dictatorship. And we just didn't know it, or we didn't feel it in our bones in the way that other people do under what appear or feel like real dictatorships. And so I think
that's why the Republicans are not going to be much help. Because you're not going to fucking patriotism your way out of this.
But Assange each step they take to normalize that dictatorship, which is what is happening under COVID and what's happening under here, that is a threat, a definitely menacing threat. It speaks to, again, the need to build alternative institutions that are opposing those things, that protect people who are trying to get, like WikiLeaks was important because it apparently, I mean, some people would say it was controlled. I don't know, but I'm just saying it got out information about what was going on with the government that they seemingly were not able to control. So if those places are going to be found that can get information to us that cannot be controlled, the movement is going to have to build its own safety structure for them, because the state is saying increasingly there is no shelter to be found if you try to mess with us. So that it will only be in us building an alternative that can protect itself and protect people who are trying to get information about the state to us. That's the only future, because if you try to work within the state and expose the state, you're going to get kicked out of school like me, or you're going to be made to leave like you did, Jessica. It was only a matter of time. Or if you're a reporter, you're going to get the lesson, like, you better shut the F up, or else this is it for you.
Yeah, I mean, every reporter, every independent journalist in the world should be afraid for their life with this. With this president.
Yeah, you bet. If a whistleblower comes to you to give you some stuff, this says, don't ever put this out there, because you are going to jail. You'll be hounded, you'll be tortured, and you could be killed and extradited to the United States into one of their whatever Guantanamo Bay things.
For me, it will be important for the people that are seeing through these lies, right? The COVID narrative and the vaccine BS. It will be important for these people to recognize and start questioning other things, just like I started questioning all vaccines now, and everything I put in my body. And at one point, I probably did dismiss anti-vaxxers. I probably was in that camp, but just like I've done that, I think it's going to require people to do their own wrestling with what they've learned, what they think they know, including the mythology of the American history. Right, like the patriotism and the idealized bourgeois, capitalist history that we've been taught, and therefore a sense of ourselves and who we are. All that is going to have to be wrestled with, and people to their different degrees, and people are going to have to take learning into their own hands. because it's not going to come from Instagram or the news or, you know, or some fucking university, right? That kind of limits the scope of understanding the world. You know, people will have to learn how to learn, you know, and be critical and also trust and build confidence and empower their own selves, you know, to be able to, you know, to say, yeah, that's not what I think, you know, and fuck your expertise, you know, and be willing to engage with people, you know. This is the beginning of an acceleration of a process, and that encompasses many areas, encompasses the environment, you know, immigration, health, livelihoods, you know, safety, shelter, war. And so it's going to take a lot of people coming together and organizing to build those safety networks, you know, to keep each other safe. Because if you think you're a prepper and, you know, and you have your own guns and your cans of food, you know, we already talked about isolation. Good luck just being, you know, hiding in a hole, you know, and what kind of life is that? You know, and so, you know, and obviously it's going to take a bunch of approaches, you know, underground, in the light, you know, and a bunch of things and people with different ideas. And so, again, my point is that this is more than just a fucking vaccine in the passes. This is literally the restructuring of a global governance system, you know, and it's going to dictate how we live the rest of our lives and the kids behind us, you know, and whether we still have organized society, because it will probably end up in a war, you know, because that's what happens when competing powers, you know, in the U.S. has lost a lot of grip, you know, in many areas, and we've said no empire goes down without a violent end, you know, and Lipson, you said it in another episode that it took 2 great world wars for the British Empire to, you know, capitulate to, like, you know, a secondary role in the world. And those wars cost a lot of lives and exhibited the latest technology for devastation rather than liberation for people. And so that's what's at stake. Again, you know, it's not just resisting individually, self-determination and autonomy. It's literally safety for now, for the future. It's about control over your autonomy, you know, and fighting for an actual democratic society. Because just like you, Lips, and I agree, we don't. You know, we don't, and I think we don't live in a democracy, and we lack the imagination to understand that we don't live in a democracy and what democracy actually is. And so some of these people who were misguided by by the vaccine on the first round, I'm hoping that some of the people that don't want the booster will come on our side and realize some of this shit. So it will take also engaging with people that we previously disagreed with, you know, and that are changing their approach. Because I am seeing that, at least with some people around me, they're starting to switch slowly, you know, to question more. And so, yes, the powers that be are betting on getting more people vaccinated, and our side, I guess, is betting on more people questioning the vaccine and the boosters and the passports. And so, welcome to those people, you know, to the struggle.
Yeah, I think on the one hand, I think we do have the tools, at least at this point. I think we have a limited amount of time, but I do think we have the tools to, like you're saying, set up, whether it's parallel societies, alternate systems, mutual aid. I think we can do it. I think what scares me the most is just the amount of trust that I think we have to have in ourselves. And when I look around, like even within people who don't buy into the narrative, and this kind of goes back to like what we were talking about last week with like just the pervasive like disembodiment and disconnection, like even like of course from each other, but also just from ourselves. Like I think you have to be really centered in yourself to have those conversations and be willing, like you said, Kenny, to say like, oh, maybe I maybe I need to hear another perspective on whatever issue X or Z. That scares me. But yeah, I think you're right.
I want to end on a good note. So share it. Stay with me.
This was really.
It's not going to be doom and gloom. Trust me.
Merry Christmas, everybody. We're gonna have World War III.
Yes, we can't have a holiday episode that is so depressing. Although I think there were elements of hope that you both spoke to, and I will too as well, because I do think I've been talking with Brandy about, like, she has just become, like, I feel like Brandy is another example of how quickly people can shift into action and go from person who's concerned about something into like really active and really. I just think that's what happens to people sometimes, and it's been surprising me the speed with which she has, kind of shifted into a gear of activism that I'm kind of falling behind in relationship to her. That to me is a story of hope for all of us changing. That's number one. But number two is, Jessica, I think, do you remember, was it 2 weeks ago when I said that I had no Christmas spirit?
Yeah.
See, look, I found my Christmas spirit. This is for Brandy. So you won't be able to. Oh, you can't see it. It says, "Oh, it's upside down." For my fabulous, beautiful wife. It's a little gift, and I was excited to get it. Although it's not the greatest. I've gotten better gifts, but I finally figured out what I wanted to get her. So I found a gift, and it wasn't just like, it was actually came from Christmas spirit coming into me. So I am feeling better now. I am feeling more like I'm ready to celebrate the holidays. We've got a tree there. This gift is underneath the tree. And we're going to make like turkey and have a dinner together and stuff like that. And I think we're actually going to get together with some people from Workers and Students for Choice after the holidays that we've come to be friends with. So
yeah.
That to me is positive. Hope springs eternal.
Yeah. I will say I actually had one of my favorite holidays of my whole life last year in 2020. I went to like a Friendsgiving at one of my few friends who did get it. And she opened her home, and it was just like all of the misfits and people who had been cast out and weren't allowed into their homes. Like all of us just flocked to my friend's house, and it was a big like potluck. It was the best food I've ever had on Thanksgiving. It was amazing, and it was so joyful. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't like blood family, but I think, if there's someone you can connect with, even if it's just small, like it doesn't have to be a party, do it. Do it.
Completely agree. Do you have any special plans that you're excited about, or just
we're not really? I mean, the other thing being here, like, we aren't really that tempted to travel because we're basically in like, this town is like a little bowl, like surrounded by mountains, and the passes are fucking like dangerous with the snow and stuff. So yeah, we're just hunkering down. It's actually really nice because my partner usually has he's got a really big family, and they're all nuts but lovely. So he oftentimes will like jet off to somewhere. So it's kind of nice to have him here. And actually my like gift, maybe I'll get him like a real gift between now and Saturday. But my like gift for him was we rented some skis, and we went actually yesterday out onto the mountain, and it was basically my first time skiing. So spent part of it on my ass, but it was really fun just to be like out in nature. You just forget about all this crap, and it's just, it was just a really beautiful day. And so yeah, it was fun.
Oh, I got a question about skiing. Like, isn't there like, there's different grades, right? Like green and blue and black.
This was cross country, but we are going to do downhill as well. And I want to try snowboarding. I'm like a summer bear. Like I would rather be in Mexico this time of year, but I'm trying to like really embrace it. And like, I've got Christmas cookies all ready to go. So yeah, trying to embrace the winter.
All right. What about you, Kenny?
Plans? Well, I am that story of capitalism being upsetting our lives. So our family is not gonna spend this Christmas together. Usually for us, the 24th is like Christmas Eve. Waiting for the arrival of Jesus. That's how we grew up. And that was the anticipation of food and stuff. We have to work the 24th, my brother and I, especially since we missed days of work going to Canada. My mother has to work on Saturday, the 25th. So I'm going to drive down to my partner's family's home for one day, but I have to drive back. So I have to drive 2 hours there and 2 hours back on the same day. Because I had to work the next day, but we'll find joy. I have a great time with my family all the time. We have a very close relationship. It sucks, that this is not happening right now, and in the context of some family, mourning that we have. But I'm grateful every week, every day that I see my family, and I do have to work on gift giving because so you were making me feel bad. I need to go look for my partner's gift. And she already gave me part of my gift. We went to a musical yesterday, Golden Girls drag show musical in San Francisco. And it was beautiful. It was funny. And, so I feel pressure, but I'm happy, to go. I hate the card lines at the malls right now, but I have a partner now again, and so gotta come through. So I'm inspired by you too, and we'll see. I guess I just want to wish health to John.
Yeah, feel better, John.
Yeah,
and to everyone, really, enjoy your family while you have it. Time is precious, and so enjoy your loved ones. Even if it's your chosen family, like you said, Jessica. So yeah, like I don't want to be a complete downer. So I do find joy in this time, and so I'm going to eat a lot of chocolate. I can tell you that.
Hey, and if you need help thinking through a gift, I can sometimes be helpful in that. So
you're married, so, you did well.
So yeah, so
I don't know what I'm doing wrong. To up my gift game.
All right. Well, thank you all for doing this. It was fun. At times it was a little bit like downer, but it was fun. Let's see.
What did you say? We're the bearers of bad news. So
yeah, I mean, just got to be real. You got to keep it real. Well, again, we didn't even mention Eduardo. So Eduardo, we miss you. Sorry,
Merry
man.
Christmas, Eduardo.
Yes. And even though Jessica has replaced you as my mom's favorite, because Eduardo used to be my mom's favorite, now it's Jessica.
We'll miss Eduardo. We miss Eduardo for the intro and outro. I'm sorry, it's not actually, but
I agree. I don't do it as well as he does, but here I'm going to try. So that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode or on our blog, what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find past episodes of this podcast there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you liked anything you heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our 8 platforms on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or the channels Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, or Telegram. If you'd like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. Until then, Jessica, thank you very much for doing this. Kenny, always great to have you on the show. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas. What else is it usually? Is this a
Hanukkah?
Hanukkah, yeah. In fact, you can see that this is like a little menorah.
Oh.
Yeah. So wish you all a happy holidays, and I guess we'll see each other next week.